Welcome to the Pivot Point, stories of courage, resilience, and reinvention. I'm your host, Jessica McGann, coach, producer, and creative, whose mission is to normalize the human experience, ignite the soul, and move you from feeling limited to limitless. Stories connect us. And my hope is that within this series, you will find at least one story that resonates with you on a deeply personal level, one that speaks to your soul or your current situation that will motivate you to keep moving forward, inspire you to make bold, brave choices in your own life, and help you feel less alone in the process. In today's podcast, I speak with Dr. Debi Silber about betrayal. This episode includes personal stories of betrayal and psychosocial education around what betrayal is and how we can heal and move forward from it. Dr. Debi Silber is the founder of the Post-Betrayal Transformation Institute and is a holistic psychologist, a health and mindset and personal development expert, and is a #1 international best-selling author. Her podcast, From Betrayal to Breakthrough, is globally ranked within the top 1.5% of podcasts, and her recent PhD study on how we experience betrayal made 3 groundbreaking discoveries that changes how long it takes to heal. In addition to being on Fox, CBS, The Dr. Oz Show, and TEDx twice, she's an award-winning speaker and coach dedicated to helping people move past their betrayals, as well as any other blocks preventing them from the health, work, relationships, confidence, and happiness they want most. This conversation is truly jam-packed with juicy insights that I'm so excited to share with you. So without further ado, let's dive in. Thank you so much for diving into this conversation with me. Betrayal is such a sensitive topic that I think a lot of people can relate to as a catapult into change for themselves. And from what I've learned about you is that you experienced a deep and personal betrayal that catapulted you into great change. And now you're an expert on it, or sorry, I should say a doctor of it. And so today I really want to hear about your experience with betrayal and the lessons you've reaped for that. So maybe you could start by telling us a little bit of what your life looked like before everything changed.
Sure. So I don't think anybody, wakes up one day and says, I think I want to study betrayal. No, you do it because you have to. And this was the case with me. So I'm in business over 30 years, health, mindset, personal development. And it was great. And I had this amazing business, 4 kids, 6 dogs, thriving business. It was all working pretty well. Had a really painful betrayal from my family. Thought I did everything I needed to do to heal from that. And then it happened again a few years later. This time it was my husband. That was the deal breaker. So got him out of the house and looked at the 2 experiences thinking, okay, what's similar to these 2? Of course, me, but what else? And I realized boundaries were always getting crossed. I never took my own needs seriously. And I'm one of those people that really believes, if nothing changes, nothing changes. So, decided, I don't even know what came over me with this move, but I enrolled in a PhD program, and it was in transpersonal psychology. Like, a book wasn't helping me out of this jam. I needed a whole PhD in it. And because I was changing so much, I didn't quite understand it. He was too, wasn't really ready to look at that. And then it was time to do a study. So I studied betrayal. And honestly, I was just studying it to just get myself out of this tremendous pain. But the study was on what holds us back, what helps us heal, and what happens to us physically, mentally, and emotionally when the people closest to us lie, cheat, and deceive. That study led to 3 groundbreaking discoveries, which changed my health, my family, my work, my life.
Wow. I think that a lot of people have had a similar experience with betrayal, changing their life completely. And you pointed out at the beginning 2 different types of betrayal: a family betrayal and what was the second? It was like how would you label it? Your husband. What are the different types of betrayals?
Yeah. It's really anything where without your awareness or consent, someone broke those spoken or unspoken rules. And the reason why it hurts so much is, think about it. It's like, these are the people you trusted the most. This is the person, or these are the people who gave you a sense of safety and security. So when this is the person, these are the people to shatter that very sense of safety and security. It's traumatizing. Like, think about it. If the person you trust the most proves untrustworthy, who do you trust? If the one you run to when other people are causing harm, when that's the one causing the harm, where do you go? It's so traumatizing. And then, the way it works is, the more we trust and the more we depend on someone, the deeper the betrayal. So, for example, a child who's totally dependent on their parent, and then the parent does something awful, let's just say, that's going to have a different impact than, let's say, your best friend sharing your secret. Still betrayals, right? It's a breaking of that spoken or unspoken rule. Different level of cleanup left in the wake.
Yeah. I've experienced betrayal in my life, and I've seen betrayal be experienced by a lot of amazing humans in my life. And I feel like the thing that we resort to immediately is like, what did I do? Or what's wrong with me that led this person to treat me that way?
Yeah.
Has that come up in your findings as well?
That was actually that was part of the first discovery. And originally I was studying betrayal and post-traumatic growth. And for those who aren't familiar, post-traumatic growth is, if you can imagine, like an upside of trauma, how any trauma, death of a loved one, disease, natural disaster, leaves you with a new awareness, insight, perspective you didn't have. But I had been through death of a loved one. I'd been through disease, and I was like, nope, betrayal feels different. But I didn't want to assume it was the same for everyone. So I asked them, if you've been through other traumas, does betrayal feel different for you? Unanimously, they said it's so different. And here's why: because it feels so intentional, we take it so personally. So the entire self gets shattered, right? Exactly to your point: rejection, abandonment, belonging, confidence, worthiness, trust. They all get shattered and need to be rebuilt. So, like, for example, if you lose someone you love, you grieve, you're sad, you mourn the loss. Life will never be the same. You don't necessarily question the whole relationship. You don't question yourself. You don't question your ability to trust. You don't question your sanity. With betrayal, you do. So that type of experience and that type of healing needed its own name, which is now called post-betrayal transformation. So that betrayal is a different type of trauma. That was the first discovery.
Yeah, that sense of like, am I crazy to be feeling this? Am I not seeing something? Like, and that deep introspective, like, okay, do I need to self-evaluate here? Is it me? Is like the first step that we all kind of go through, is what I'm hearing. So
Yes.
when you were experiencing that family betrayal, were you quite young? Were you yet able to process or understand what was happening in that moment?
It's so interesting because, when something traumatizing happens and you remember exactly where you are, like everyone, if I say, where were you D-Day, Discovery Day, you know exactly where you were. Well, I remember as a little kid. I mean, this is how profound it was, because I remember thinking to myself, because I was just assuming that it was all me, like, exactly to your point. And I remember thinking to myself, what if it's not me? That was so earth-shattering to my way of thinking that I stopped myself cold, and I remember. And I'll tell you, this was this is what happened with that, because that turned into, and I don't even know what made me think of this, but I just kept thinking to myself, just keep thinking that. And the what if it's not me turned into, over time, I don't think it's me. And that was equally as crazy to think. And then I was like, just keep going with that. And then it turned into, what if it's them? Again, as earth-shattering crazy. And then I kept sort of watering that seed, and it turned into, oh my gosh, it's them. And then it was like, that was the beginning of a different healing journey. But yeah, it's, these things are so crazy that you just automatically assume it must be me. What's wrong with me? But it's not.
And it's so beautiful to see how curiosity and just engaging in questions and actually taking the time to ask yourself those things can be so powerful, rather than just living on autopilot and allowing those first thoughts to be the ones that run your train. You stop and go, wait. Is that the path I want to be going? Is that how I want to be seeing myself? And you had that insight. at such a young age or before your PhD to be able to do that for yourself, which is really cool. So what about with your partner? You know, that's a betrayal that we see so often. I've had multiple infidelities in my life, and I'm not even sure that that's the betrayal you encountered with your partner. Maybe you could tell us
Yeah.
a little bit more about that.
Yeah. And again, it's so incredibly painful. And that was the deal breaker. And so my intention after that was, okay, now I'm a single mom with all these kids and all these dogs in this business. I don't know how I'm going to do this or whatever, but I was going to heal. And, it's one of those things, unless you experience it, it's hard to explain the heartbreak and the devastation and the pain. And that really was my intention. It was, okay, well, I'm just going to heal from this. But I remember thinking to myself, it was just a moment going through the program. If I can heal from this, I'm taking everybody with me. Like, it was just this weird kind of knowing. And to close the loop on my story, and I want to get to the second and third discovery, healing is always a choice, whether you heal yourself and move on. And that's what I did with my family. It wasn't an option to heal with them. Or if the situation lends itself, if you're willing, if you want to, you rebuild something from the ground up new with the person who hurt you. And, as two totally different people, that's what I did with my husband. Not long ago, we married each other again. New rings, new vows, new dress, and our 4 kids is our bridal party. But here's what happens. People are so afraid of the complete and utter death and destruction of the old. And that's why they never have an opportunity to birth the new. And that's why repeat betrayal is so common, one of the most classic signs of an unhealed betrayal. And that's why, and I'm happy to share also the 3 groups in the study who did not heal. This is one of the reasons why so many people struggle with this, because they struggle with making that big decision to have these consequences. And then they look at it saying, well, oh my gosh, I don't want to be the one to break up a family, and I don't want to be the one to create all this chaos. And who am I to do this and do that? And they don't think to themselves, what about the person who did the betrayal? That's the person who created the chaos and broke up the family. That you're thinking about yourself and your own healing and how you'll be for your own kids, and people within your care and reach, right? That's who we don't think about. We think about, okay, I'm just going to struggle and suffer in silence and clean up this mess I didn't make so that everything can stay as is. And it doesn't work that way. It just doesn't work.
Have you noticed any difference between how men and women show up in betrayal? Like, when you're talking about the self-sacrifice that a lot of people make, and when they experience that betrayal, of thinking of the kids and the house and all the other people it's going to affect if they stand up and walk away, is there a difference between men and women and how they react?
I'll tell you, we have a lot of men within the PBT Institute also. They're not as vocal. So they're not, they're not, let's say, responding to me on social media as often as the women do, but it doesn't mean the pain is any less. They struggle just as much. They're just as easily blindsided and duped and hurt and betrayed. So they too, they completely struggle. It's one of those things that they're in so much shock, whether it's a man or a woman, they're in so much shock that they're sinking. It's like quicksand, and then they struggle with these symptoms of post-betrayal syndrome, and then they stay in a certain stage, and which I'm happy to explain all of that in the second discovery. So you can, if we're going to create this mess, I want to create a way out of it for you. So
thank you.
Yeah. So the second discovery, this was exciting too. And what we learned was there's actually a collection of symptoms, physical, mental, and emotional, so common to betrayal. It's known as post-betrayal syndrome. So we've had, 95,000 people take our post-betrayal syndrome quiz on our site to see to what extent they're struggling. A few things about that. The first thing is, we've all been taught time heals all wounds, right? Well, I have the proof that when it comes to betrayal, that's not true. Time won't heal it. Even a new relationship won't heal it. And that's what we count on. We have there's a question on the quiz that says, is there anything else you'd like to share? And people write things like, my betrayal happened 35 years ago. I'm never going to trust again. My betrayal happened 40 years ago. I can still feel the hate. My betrayal happened 10 years ago. I feel gutted. So we know, do not count on time and do not count on a new relationship unless and until you deliberately and intentionally heal it. It will follow you around like a shadow and show up in your relationships, in your health, in your work. And I will show you how that happens also. But every few months, I pull the stats from the quiz to see where people are. I'm happy to share them if that would help.
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to hear that.
Yeah. So now imagine men and women, 95,000 plus people, just about every country's represented. 78% constantly revisit their experience. 81% feel a loss of personal power. Listen to these numbers too. 80% are hypervigilant. 94% deal with painful triggers. The most common physical symptoms, 71% have low energy. 68% have sleep issues. 63% have extreme fatigue. So you wake up, you're exhausted, your adrenals have tanked. 47% have weight changes. Maybe in the beginning, you can't hold anything down. Later on, you're emotionally eating using food for comfort. 45% have a digestive issue. That could be anything: Crohn's, IBS, diverticulitis, constipation, diarrhea, anything. The most common mental symptoms: 78% are overwhelmed, 70% are walking around in a state of disbelief, 64% are in shock, 62% can't concentrate. So think about this: you can't concentrate, you're exhausted, you have a gut issue, now you have to go to work. Now you still have to raise your kids. That's not even the emotional issues. Emotionally, 88% experience extreme sadness. 83% are very angry. And, bouncing back and forth between those two all day long can be exhausting. 82% are hurt. 80% have anxiety. 79% are stressed. Just a few more. Here's why I wrote the book, Trust Again. 84% have an inability to trust. 67% prevent themselves from forming deep relationships because they're afraid of being hurt again. 80% find it hard to move forward. 90% want to move forward, but they don't know how.
Mm-hmm. There's so much in what you just shared that I hear like clients and friends identify so often.
Mm-hmm.
I'm digesting all that you just shared. And the part of me, it's like, when I hear all that, I'm sure my listeners are like, well, then what do you do? Like, that just sounds so debilitating. Like, where do you even begin to heal from that? And what would you say to someone who's asking that question?
It's all about the third discovery. And I want to get to that. I just want to share this one last thing. Think about it. Those numbers were super high. You didn't hear me say 20%, 30%, right? These numbers are really high. To me, this was the craziest part of it all. These numbers aren't necessarily from a recent betrayal. This is from a parent who did something awful when you were a kid. This is from the girlfriend or boyfriend who broke your heart in high school. So think about this. That person may not know, care, remember. They may not even be alive. And here we are, decades later, with symptoms of post-betrayal syndrome because of something that was never healed, that happened decades ago. That's the crime, right? I mean, the good news is you can heal from all of it. And that was the third discovery. This, for me, was the most exciting. And what was discovered was, while we can stay stuck for years, decades, a lifetime, and so many people do, as you said, all the people you're thinking of, if we're going to fully heal, and by fully heal, I mean those symptoms of post-betrayal syndrome that I just shared, to this completely rebuilt place of post-betrayal transformation, where you're rebuilding your life and yourself, you're going to go through 5 proven, predictable stages. And what's even more exciting about that is we know what happens physically, mentally, and emotionally at every one of those stages. And we know what's needed to move from one stage to the next. Healing is entirely predictable. And I'm happy to share the stages with you if you want to hear them.
Yeah, I think a lot of people oftentimes think of the stages of grief, right? Like anger but it's cool to know that there's stages to betrayal.
Yeah. Absolutely. And grieving has a really important place in healing from betrayal, and it's not early on, it's actually later. So we can get to that. The 5 stages are all in Trust Again. It's what all of our coaches are certified in. It's all we do within the PBT Institute. Here's a boiled down version. So stage 1, that's before it happens. And if you can imagine 4 legs of a table, the 4 legs being physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual. What I saw with everybody, me too, was this heavy lean on the physical and the mental, thinking and doing, and kind of neglecting or ignoring the emotional and the spiritual, feeling and being. Well, if a table only has 2 legs, easy for that table to topple over. That's us. Stage 2, shock, trauma, D-Day, Discovery Day, the scariest of all of the stages. And this is the breakdown of the body, the mind, and the worldview. This is the day you get the news. It's like someone pulled a mask off and revealed who they had been.
The
You've
Scooby-Doo
ignited
moment.
the stress. Oh, yeah. You've ignited the stress response. You're now headed for every single stress-related symptom, illness, condition, disease. Your mind is in a complete state of chaos and overwhelm. You cannot make sense out of what you just discovered. And your worldview has just been shattered. Your worldview is your mental model, the rules that govern you. Trust this person, don't go there. These are the rules, And in one earth-shattering moment, every rule you've been holding to be real and true is no longer. The bottom has bottomed out on you, and a new bottom hasn't been formed yet. This is terrifying, right? But think about it. If the bottom were to bottom out on you, what would you do? You grab hold of anything or anyone to stay safe and stay alive. And that's stage 3. Survival instincts emerge. It's the most practical out of all of the stages. If you can't help me, get out of my way. How do I survive this? Who can I trust? What do I do? Like, how do I feed my kids? But here's the trap, though. Stage 3, by far, is the most common place we get stuck. Most people are in stage 3. And here's why. Once we've figured out how to survive our experience, because it feels so much better than the shock and trauma of where we just came from, we think it's good. We're like, whew, okay. And because we don't know there's anywhere else to go, right? We think this is it. So we plant roots here, we park here. We're not supposed to, but we don't know that, but we do. And 4 things happen. The first thing is you start getting all these small self-benefits from being there. Think about it. You get to be right. We like being right. We get our story. We love our story. We get sympathy from everyone we tell our story to, right? We start getting all these things, all these benefits. And because we're not getting anything else, we're like, okay, we'll take it. And it feels good. So we plant deeper roots. Again, we're not supposed to, but we don't know. And now because we're here longer than we should be, the mind starts doing things like, well, maybe you're not that great. Maybe you deserved it. Maybe this, maybe that. So we plant deeper roots, right? Again, we're not supposed to be here, but we don't know. Now, because these are the thoughts we're thinking, well, this is the energy we're putting out. Like energy attracts like energy. So now we start attracting people and circumstances and relationships towards us to confirm, yep, this is where we belong. Here's where you join that lame support group, and you will actually sabotage your growth because now you found your people. Here's where we will sabotage our healing because we don't want to outgrow our betrayer. You see what I mean? It gets worse, but I'll get you out of here.
So I just want to clarify this stage that you're identifying here. Is this kind of the stage where, like when you talk about having a group and you're discussing, is this kind of like living in that state of betrayal and living and being stuck in that state of victimhood of like, I'm going to carry this badge as someone who's been betrayed. And this is the tough skin I'm going to wear on my back and carry that kind of layer of grit and hatred with you everywhere?
1,000,000,000%.
Okay.
Exactly. And this is why support is more crucial than ever, but the support that lifts and inspires, not the commiserate and, and that's the worst thing. And this is why I'll tell you, we have so many people coming into the PBT Institute, coming off of groups like that, because all they do is commiserate. The other thing is they come in because they have therapy trauma. Here's the thing. If anything is going to glue you to stage 3, it's endlessly unpacking your story so that you're re-traumatized, you're revalidated, you're doing all those things, you're heard, but there's not one thing moving you towards stage 4. And people spend years in therapy and they're like, why am I still struggling with this? That is exactly why. And I'm a psychologist, but I am a coach first. And I'll tell you, I see it all day long where, they're like, oh, well, I'm seeing a therapist. Yeah, that's what I'm going to do. And then I'm in my support group. And you're wondering why you're still having repeat betrayals and why you're still, struggling with symptoms of post-betrayal syndrome. It's because everything you're doing is keeping you in stage 3. So here's the last piece that we do for stage 3, right? Because we're so unhappy, right? Let's say you're in therapy, from someone who doesn't truly understand betrayal, and the 5 stages, you're in that support group, you have all these symptoms, nothing is moving you forward. Now you're so miserable, but you're like, I have to get through my day. I mean, I have to go to work. I have to raise my kids. Right here, you start using food, drugs, alcohol, work, TV, keeping busy, whatever it is. So think about this: to numb, avoid, and distract yourself from this painful place. You do it for a day, a week, a month. Now it's a habit, a year, 10 years, 20 years. And I can see someone 20 years later and say, that emotional eating you're doing, that drinking you're doing, do you think that has anything to do with your betrayal? And they would look at me like I'm crazy. They would say, it happened 20 years ago. All they did was put themselves in stage 3 and stay there. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, it makes sense. It reminds me of a personal betrayal that I experienced and the advice my mother gave to me at that time, because therapy, of course, has a place of healing for people where you do need to go and you do need to sit in that discomfort and process those emotions. And it's great for that. And the best advice my mom gave to me when I was healing from my a really massive betrayal that left me heartbroken and alone in Australia was, she said, grieve, feel that pain, feel your way through it, and pick a day where you're no longer going to allow that feeling to dictate your life any longer, where you're going to start choosing to find better thoughts and better feelings and not allow that to just completely take over your life. And it was hard. It was done in small steps each and every way, but it took me away from, I'm alone now, nobody wants to date me, I'm the worst, and actually led me to falling madly in love with myself, which what's the 4th stage? Is that the 4th stage for falling in love with yourself?
Yeah, it's an important piece. And your mom gave you great advice. Here's the thing though, betrayal hits you on every level: physically, mentally, emotionally, psychologically, spiritually. So all levels have to be addressed. Like, for example, we have one of our coaches, they're all certified in the 5 stages, but they all specialize in different things. So we have one of our coaches who specializes in the somatic body-based, practices, because the issues are in the tissues. They just are, Anyway, so if you're willingness is a big word right here, because many people are not willing to grieve, mourn the loss, right? A bunch of things you need to do. You move to stage 4. Stage 4 is finding and adjusting to a new normal. So here's where you acknowledge, I can't undo what happened, but I control what I do with it. Right there in that decision, you're turning down the stress response. You're not healing just yet, but at least you stopped the massive damage you'd been accumulating in stages 2 and stage 3. Stage 4 feels like, if you've ever moved to a new house, office, condo, whatever, your stuff's not all there. It's not quite cozy yet, but you're like, okay, all right, we got this. It feels like that. But think about this. If you were to move, you don't take everything with you, right? You don't take those things that don't represent the version of you want to be in your new space. And what I found was there's this one spot moving out of stage 3 into stage 4, where if your friends weren't there for you, you don't take them with you right here. You've outgrown them. And it's so interesting because people say to me all the time, what the heck? I've had these friends for years. Is it me? Yes, it is. You're undergoing a transformation. And if they don't rise, they don't come. That lame support group, you don't take them with you. That betrayer who isn't changing, and so you're realizing your value and your worth, you don't take them with you, right here. So when you've settled into this new space, you've made it cozy, you've made it mentally home, you move into the 5th most beautiful stage. And this is healing, rebirth, and a new worldview. The body starts to heal. Self-love, self-care, eating well, exercise, stuff like that. You didn't have the bandwidth. for that earlier. You were surviving. Now you do. Your mind is healing. You're making new rules. You're making all kinds of new boundaries based on the road you just traveled. And you have a new worldview based on everything you see so clearly now. And the four legs of that table, in the beginning, it was all about the physical and the mental. By this point, you're solidly grounded because you're focused on the emotional and the spiritual too. Those are the 5 stages.
So stage 5 is kind of like completing the cycle and entering this stage of post-traumatic growth, or like post-betrayal growth, could we say?
It's post-betrayal transformation. It's when you've rebuilt your life and yourself. It is so common that we see our members in stage 4 and stage 5. Here's where we'll see new levels of health. Here's where we'll see new relationships, healthy new relationships, either with someone completely new or a very healthy, very new relationship with the person who hurt them. We'll see new businesses. We'll see new brands, new passion projects, like the PBT Institute. That was a stage 5 thing. You don't have access to these new evolutions of you and these new ideas when you're stuck in your trauma. But I'll tell you, there were 3 groups in the study who did not heal. And, this will explain why you don't get to that stage 4 or stage 5. The first one, this was the group, they had their story. That was it. That they, as you mentioned before, them and their story. And at the end of the day, that's all they had. The second group, they ran to the doctor who put them on a mood stabilizer or an anti-anxiety medication. They numbed, they did whatever they could to distract. Now, it may have made the day a bit easier, but there was a price for that. They didn't heal. And the third group, this was the one where the betrayer really had very little consequences, whether it was out of financial fear, not wanting to break up a family, religious reasons. There's a big one. They just tried to turn the other cheek. I saw only 2 things with this group: a further deterioration of that relationship. And this group by far was the most physically sick.
Oh, I can imagine. I can only imagine. And each stage is done at a different pace per person, right? Like everyone's going to ride this. Like you could spend multiple years at any given stage, or you could, no,
you don't have to at all. We have our high level program, our transform program, where members work with me. They move through all 5 stages in 6 months.
Oh, wow. But you're such a trained, this is your baby. This is your beast. I'm sure you're very good at taking people through that. But for people who are not maybe able to access coaching and go through this in their own kind of way, it could take.
Yeah, they still could move through it so much more quickly because there's a roadmap. The roadmap is the 5 stages. So if someone, like even our signature program in the community, our Betrayal to Breakthrough program, it's if you follow just that program, you will literally move through the stages. I'm not saying it's easy. It's the hardest, probably one of the hardest and the most transformative things you'll ever do. But it's not and the stages are in trust again. So, people ask me all the time, do you have to, work at these high levels? And we have entry-level programs within the PBT Institute too. No, you don't have to. You have to be willing to move through the stages. That's what you have to be willing to do.
What about those who experience a betrayal, say in their intimate relationship, but are looking to still move forward with that same partner? I know you've remarried your partner, and so there's not maybe necessarily the same kind of loss of life that you have to like mourn, but you do need to be willing to step into a new dynamic because an affair will change so much in your relationship. So is there a difference about whether or not you're choosing to stay in that relationship or getting back to that trust to that person again? That's maybe different than what we've addressed so far.
Sure. There are so many things to consider. The first being to rebuild without the betrayer becoming someone completely and totally different is a recipe for pain and disaster. That's the first thing, because betrayal will show you who someone truly is. It also has the opportunity to wake them up to who they temporarily became. You don't have to do anything with it, but if they become someone entirely new because of it, you at least have something to work with. If they're not using and that's why we have a program, a rebuild program for the betrayer. If they're not using that opportunity to completely change everything that led them to make those decisions and use the opportunity to become someone they're proud of, right? If you're rebuilding with someone who has no intention of really doing the work to change, what's that? What are you, right? What are you doing right there? And what's your reason behind that? I would really invite everybody to consider that, because the price you're going to pay is enormous in your health and your well-being and your level of confidence and self-esteem and all of that. So that's the first, that's the first thing I'd say. And it's a different dynamic when you rebuild yourself and move on, right? Like I did with my family, but we have our coaches who have done that with their partners, and a different dynamic when the relationship is completely over and you rebuild something new. We have coaches who have done that as well, including me. So all very different experiences. But what I have found between the research, my own experience, all of our certified coaches and members within the community, that death and destruction of the old is so hard. It's so hard, but it allows for the birth of the new, and it allows for something spectacular. I use this analogy, and in the second TEDx I did, do you have post-betrayal syndrome? I give this analogy of a house. And here's the difference between resilience and transformation. Like, resilience is restoring and bringing back, and you need that for your everyday. So using this analogy of a house, like let's say a house needs a new, paint job, and you paint, that would be resilience, right? Let's say it needs a new roof. You get a roof, that would be resilience. Here's trauma and transformation. A tornado comes by and levels your house, right? Like a paint job's not going to fix it, and a roof's not going to fix it, Now, you have every right, and this would be the stage 3 people, to kick and scream and cry and mourn the loss of your house until your last day, and you could call all your friends over and say, isn't this the most horrible thing you'd ever seen? And they'd all agree, and you'd be right. And you can, until your last breath, you could talk about your house. However, should you choose to rebuild your house, you don't have to, but if you choose to, why in the world would you build the same one? It's not there, right? Why not build something magnificent? Why not make it better, more beautiful, whatever it is to you? That's the opportunity, whether you make this version of yourself that wouldn't have the opportunity to exist, or if you choose that new relationship as that 2.0 relationship. That's the opportunity, but you only get that with the death and destruction of the old.
When you reflect on your own healing journey, do you remember the moment that something switched in you, where you went from grieving and heartbreak to, I'm not going to let this be my story, or I'm going to figure this out? Like, this led to many years of research, and now it's a dedication of your life. Do you remember that moment where it was like, oh, I figured it out, I know what I need to do now?
It wasn't, I know what I need to do. It was a dark night of the soul moment. And everybody, when you have them, you just know. And the pain, it's not that it's better or worse for anybody, but I'm a highly sensitive empath. And integrity is my highest value. So you take integrity as your highest value, then you take a highly sensitive empath and you betray them. It almost doesn't get worse for your being to be able to process that, right? And because I've lived a very simple life with one rule: if it's going to hurt, don't do it. And I assume everybody lives by that same rule. And I'm always shocked and amazed that that's not the way other people work, right? But yeah, it was an intensely painful dark night of the soul experience. And I was like, oh, no. This can kill me, or, I can do something else with it. I didn't quite know just what yet, but I knew. And then it was interesting. I don't know how spiritual your audience is, but can we go there a little bit?
Oh,
Would that be okay?
I love spirituality. I bring a lot of spirituality into my life. Let's go there.
Perfect. All right. So we're going to go here now. So, one of the things with betrayal is you lose your trust in everything, right? So you lose this sense of connectedness, and you just completely lose trust. And people, it was interesting because in the study, people got more spiritual, whether it was the spiritual side of their religion or just spiritual, because they needed something to believe in again, to feel a sense of connection to something, to trust in something. And I was no different. I had been spiritual already, but this really kicked it up a notch for me. And I remember seeing an intuitive counselor who's since become a dear friend. And because I wanted sort of that direct line, I needed answers.
Yeah.
And I remember walking in, and I didn't even sit down. And she starts laughing. She's like, "Oh my gosh, how you two planned this." She didn't know a thing about me. I was like, "What?" She goes, "Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. He needed something so catastrophic so he could crash and burn and become the husband, father, friend that he's supposed to be. And you needed something so big so that you can heal and then teach from this deep place of knowing. You're going to have an institute. You're going to have books. You're going to have this whole following around betrayal." And I was like, "You're crazy." So, I
I love
remember there.
that story. That's amazing.
Yeah.
I'm such a believer that, when you talk about spirituality, like I'm a believer that we come here for a purpose to learn and grow our souls
Mm.
and that the challenges that we face are things that we've plotted and planned in advance to help our souls grow. As hard as that may be to sometimes confront, because we never want to go through those things. But when you can look at it, at least for me, it's been a tremendous help for me as I navigate difficult parts in my life, is believing that there's something that I can learn and grow from that hardship. It sounds like that's what I'm
It,
hearing. Your perspective
it
might
is. And
be.
so I remember thinking to myself, just as I said when I was a little kid, what if, I asked those questions. And I remember thinking to myself, what if she's right? I'm going to do all the work to heal, and I have no idea what my future is going to look like. But what if she's right? It was just a little thing in the back of my mind. And then you do the work to heal regardless, right? And then when you do something good with something painful, it's just trauma well served.
You know so much about betrayal now, and I can see in how you talk and how you hold yourself. You have such strength and a knowing of who you are and how you want to present yourself in this world. But that does not stop anyone from betraying us at any time. Since doing this work, have you met or faced any betrayals and notice a difference in how you feel or carry or move yourself through that now that you know as much as you do?
Yeah, that's such a good question. I don't think we're never like betrayal proof. Our BS meter is sharpened and strengthened for sure. I think we automatically don't attract the same type of people into our lives because we're just resonating at a different level. It's not a better or worse. We're just at a different level of consciousness. Um, but yeah, I mean, people get angry at me all the time. Like I just got someone was just felt I betrayed them this morning. And I'll share this really quick story. We're honored that I'm not sure when this is going to air, but we were honored that just last week, the PBT Institute is the founder of of National Forgiveness Day, which will be September 1st, right? So I was so excited about that because we're doing a 21-day forgiveness journey, and it's so needed. So I sent an email to our list, and someone emailed me this morning, just getting so angry, like feeling like I betrayed her because she's been betrayed, and why should she just forgive because her partner's still not doing everything to forgive, to make up for what he had done, and all of these things, and so in her mind, I betrayed her, and we can interpret things however we like, and I wrote her back saying, well, what if it's self-forgiveness, that you forgave yourself for not treating yourself with the love, respect, the care that you needed going through such a painful time. So I think these things always come our way. It's how we navigate them, really.
I
I don't know if that
love that
answers
you
your
touched,
question.
I love that you touched on forgiveness,
Mhm,
because I have had to forgive people who weren't sorry for what they did to me. And
mhm.
people wonder, like, how could you forgive that person? How could you just like let them, how come you didn't report them or say this to someone or whatever it may be? And it's like, I forgave them for me. I didn't forgive them for them. That it doesn't
Exactly.
mean that I'm going to welcome them back in my life. It's not that I'm going to celebrate them for all of time, but I'm not going to carry the weight of that with me any
Mhm.
longer because it doesn't serve me. And that question, I faced two betrayals in my life, one very soon after the other. And I had done such tremendous healing from the first one that when the second one happened, as much as it was like, I was raging, I was pissed, I was, I had all those feelings, but the healing process was so much shorter for me because the thought that I had was like, I am so much better than this. Like, I do not deserve this treatment. And knowing that love for myself and trusting in who I am as a person, I think served me really well in that process.
Yeah.
So working with coaches that keep you in alignment with who you are, how you want to be showing up in this world, can be great in healing whatever's left to be unhealed, but also keep you strong so that when shit does come and shit does hit the fan, you can stay grounded in your sense of self. As we come to an end of this conversation, you've shared so much juicy information to our listeners. What do you really hope, if you could summarize, that our listeners take away from this conversation if they are themselves currently healing from a betrayal?
Yeah, there's a roadmap. There's no reason to stay in stage 3. It's such quicksand, and it's a choice. It really is. Healing is a choice. There's a roadmap for it now.
And if anyone listening is like, I need to work with Debi ASAP, what is the best way that people can continue learning from you or connect with you?
Everything is at the PBT, as in Post-Betrayal Transformation, thepbtinstitute.com.
Great. And I will have that linked below and share. I'll have all of Debi's links below. You can follow her on, I think, all the social media sites, or I'll have her TED Talks, which are phenomenal, linked below as well. Thank you so much for taking the time to participate in this conversation with me. I've really learned so much in this conversation, and I hope the listeners have as well. If you enjoyed today's episode, please consider liking, subscribing, and letting us know your thoughts in the comments below. It truly means the world to me to hear from you. New episodes will be available every Saturday, both on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. And if you would like to learn more about my work as a coach, today's guest, or have a story that you would like to share on the Pivot Point, check out the episode description for more information. Now, time for the legal stuff. This podcast is presented to you solely for educational and entertainment purposes. I may be a professionally certified coach myself, but hosting a podcast is not coaching. This podcast should not be used in substitution of working with a licensed therapist, doctor, coach, or other qualified professionals. Copy that? Amazing. See you on the next episode. Nothing but love, Jess.